good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is 4 Shots of Kajukenbo, and this is our bonus episode with Grandmaster Lynn Case. Be sure to check out our accompanying episode where Grandmaster Case helps us discuss the legalities of self-defense. Now, Grandmaster Case is a Kajukenbo Grandmaster, but he also is a retired police officer in the state of Idaho, and he runs a police academy at the Idaho State University Law Enforcement Training Program. He knows a few things about the law, is what I'm trying to say. So thank you, Lynn, for joining us. I'm really happy to have you, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have to say today.
It'll be fun. We'll have a good time.
Yeah, I think so. I hope we will. Let's jump into our first question. And for those of you at home, please do not take anything you hear immediately as gospel. Laws will change from country to country and state to state. We're going to be as general as we can, but anything you hear might be incorrect in your neck of the woods. So please double check anything you hear with your local laws before you get yourself in trouble. With that, our first question, we'll jump right in. What are the legal definitions of self-defense and assault, and when does one become the other?
Okay. Legal definitions are pretty easy because they're in the book. So it's just a matter of looking them up and finding them. So in Idaho, and that's not true in all states, but in Idaho, we have a difference between assault and battery. Some states, it's the same thing. So for Idaho, basically, if I take a punch at you and I miss, that's assault. If I make a connection, that's battery. So an assault is simply an attempted battery. But the definition reads a little more in depth. It's an unlawful attempt coupled with apparent ability to commit a violent injury on the person of another, or intentional unlawful threat by word or act to do violence on that person, coupled with an apparent ability to do so. So, and battery is simply making contact. So willful and unlawful use of force or violence upon the person of another.
So once you actually create contact, it becomes battery. But the idea of even the attempt to do it allows for self-defense.
Yes, absolutely. Now they wrote it that way specifically because you have to have all those elements in there. So you have to have the apparent ability along with the actual threat. So I can say I'm going to punch you in the nose, but obviously I can't reach you. So that doesn't work, right? But if we were standing face to face and angry at each other, and then I made that threat, that would count as assault because I have the apparent ability to follow through.
Okay.
And then once I give it a try and nick you, because you're pretty quick, that would become battery.
Thanks. So you mentioned about the words as well. Does that mean if you're threatening violence, that doesn't count? That's not considered assault. If there is the possibility of being able to hurt somebody, but you're only using words, that's not assault yet.
It can be.
It can be.
If I'm standing in your presence and I tell you that I'm going to hit you in the nose and I do it with anger and I create a well-founded fear in you, that's assault. Interesting.
So a lot of this sounds familiar to what I know about California law as well. But I had not heard that idea that even just the words itself can be considered assault. And I didn't hear that in some places assault and battery are the same. So I'm already getting my mind blown here to hearing some new things from me.
We got on that assault thing. We don't want to get that too confusing here. On top, and we could joke back and forth. That's funny. I'm going to punch you in the nose. That's not assault.
Right.
It has to be I have to create that well-founded fear in you. So if we get an argument outside of a bar, I've clenched my fist and I say, I'm going to punch you in the nose. That probably should create that well-founded fear.
And I imagine it's really hard to prove all this in court, like the fear exists or not.
If you don't have a victim, it's hard. But if you have a victim, they can always testify to that.
Right.
And of course, you would look at the entire circumstances. If it would lead a reasonable person, and a lot of these codes depend on a reasonable person. If it would lead a reasonable person to have fear, then we're there. We're good. Okay.
Now, what about? So it sounds to me like there's this thing that tough guys do when they try to intimidate you on the street. They do this little body check. Like it looks like they're going to throw a punch or a headbutt or something, but it's not actually an attack. It is just to make you flinch. My guess is then that would be considered assault as well. Is that correct? Yes. Even though they're not actually trying to hit you?
Yes.
Okay. What about wrestling then? Chokeholds, locks. I imagine then that the attempt Because everyone has this image of striking because we've been, raised on cowboy movies and everything's John Wayne, big block and big punch. What about like the attempt to put someone in chokehold would be assault, I guess. And then once you're actually choking them is battery?
Once you put a hand on them, it's battery.
Oh, okay.
So as soon as you spin me around to put that choke on, that's battery.
Okay.
Because it's the unlawful touching of another.
Just to touch.
You throw that chokehold on, that could go to a deadly force situation.
Okay. Now, another thing about grappling and striking and such, is it ever okay to strike a downed opponent? I think there's this image that, the good guys don't hit a downed opponent. Is it okay to do that in self-defense?
Heck yeah.
Yeah?
Oh. Yeah, shoot, yeah. If the fight isn't over, the fight isn't over.
Okay.
If they're down and the fight's over, you gotta quit.
Got it. So I imagine that's the line then.
Yeah, if the fight's still going, the fight's still going.
Wow. Okay. I think a lot of people don't know that. They have this wrong image of when that's supposed to happen. So
that comes in handy because there are so many complaints, comments, statements about Kajukenbo as overkill.
Yeah, I've heard that many times.
Because we have a lot of continuation, right?
Right.
It's easier to stop that in a fight than it is to learn that in a fight.
Right.
So you should be training to have the ability to stop that attack when it's over, when the fight's over. Mm-hmm. But you can't train yourself to continue it on if you haven't ever done that.
Okay.
So I got no problem with the way we train with the continuations. Because you can stop that in the fight, assuming you haven't lost your mind yet, right?
Right.
Assuming you're still thinking through the fight.
Right. And you mentioned earlier about again, I'm going to mention the courts a little bit pretty soon, but also a reasonable person. I think they're going to look at, would a reasonable person stop at this point, or would a reasonable person continue to ensure the fight is finished?
Exactly.
Now, just to summarize everything so far, because this is just the basics we're at, but just to summarize, two situations. So number one, I'm walking down the street. I'm confronted by an angry neo-Nazi. He's bigger than me. He's a championship kickboxer, and he's violently threatening me and my family. And then I'm scared. I'm feeling threatened. He advances on us and does one of those fake body checks. That is assault, and I have the right to strike him. Is that correct?
You have the right to strike him. Preemptive strikes are allowed.
Okay. Now, the second situation, real quick, same exact thing, but it's an 87-year-old grandma who does not do kickboxing, but she's violently threatening me the same way. Let's say she's using the same words and she advances on me, maybe even puts her hand on me, but I don't feel threatened. I don't feel any kind of worry. That is not assault. And do I still have the right to punch this poor old woman in the head in that case?
I don't think I'd do that. If you don't have a fear that she's going to hurt you or your family, then your response needs to be really, really, really minimal.
Okay.
And it's because if I'm a full-grown man and I have to deal with a smaller 9-year-old, because some of those 9-year-olds are big. But if I have to deal with a smaller 9-year-old, then I have to be really careful how I do that. I can control them, but I would probably never hit them. I can't imagine why you would. So your response has to be in relation to the danger.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it totally does. In fact, one thing I brought up before, a lot of people don't like the pressure point fighting. And I really don't like pressure point strikes, but I think this is an example where you don't want to hit somebody, but pressure points can be used to control somebody as an alternative to just, knocking their teeth out. Now, I want to go on to our next topic, which is knives. But one thing I want to say really quickly for people who are interested in studying self-defense and such, and Lynn, please correct me if I'm wrong. I want to know if I'm wrong in this. But I feel like in America, people say you are innocent until proven guilty. But in the courtroom, sometimes a lot of people will say it's more like guilty until proven innocent. I mean, you are in there for a street fight, and it only takes one person on the jury who is a pacifist or a racist or a cop hater, and they're immediately going to label you as a thug or a dirty cop without even seeing the evidence. And then maybe you are legally 100% right defending yourself, but there are no witnesses. and the guy you legally beat up has 3 friends who don't like you and are willing to lie in court, you're going to have an uphill battle, is what I'm saying. Is that true? That basically it depends. It's not really what happens in real life. It matters what the jury believes happens and what kind of person they think you are.
Couple answers to that.
Okay.
First of all, the problem that pops up is the trial that happens in the public, the trial of public opinion. That's one trial. And that's usually a very one-sided trial because particularly as a law enforcement officer, I don't get to tell my side of the story to the public. The news, I can't talk to the news. I can't tell them what actually happened. So now the family is out there spreading whatever story they feel like spreading. I'm sure this young man who just got out of prison was on his way to college and was going to be a doctor. It's possible, but yeah, all of a sudden this is the best young man in the world, and that's their side of the story. I can't tell mine, so I'm being tried in the public venue. So, when we go to court, you have to remember that as far as the law is concerned, he is innocent until proven guilty. We have to prove him guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Kind of a tricky phrase there. What's that mean? That doesn't mean guilty beyond any possibility of anything else could have happened. It's, would a reasonable person believe that this person actually did that crime? And I have to convince 6 if it's a misdemeanor, 12 if it's a felony. I got to convince all of them, not just 1 or 2. I got to convince them all that he's guilty. If just one of them says not guilty, we don't have a guilty verdict.
Right.
So it's heavily favored in the towards the defendant, whoever that might be. But you're right. There's absolutely a danger of the juries coming in with some kind of a predisposition, some kind of previous experience, or the way they view things could be different from the way others view things. And that can be family to family, city to city, state to state. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, there is this danger. I think it's really important. I was, talking with family that I have in law enforcement as well, that there is that danger. Even if you do everything right, it might not work out for you. You have to be very careful when you're defending yourself to make sure you don't get yourself in trouble, basically, with talking about the public opinion and everything else and what they know. Okay, let's move on to our next topic, knives. Now, I'm not going to cover guns too much because largely this is I'm in Japan, and largely this is from the viewpoint of Japan. And we can talk about this more later if you like, but basically guns are a non-issue when it comes to Japan for various reasons, cultural and otherwise. But knives are an issue here. So I would like to know about in America, how do knives affect the definitions of assault and battery and the penalties you get for it as well?
Okay. So now we have to move into a variation of the 2 codes that we just talked about, assault and battery. Okay. It moves to aggravated assault and aggravated battery, which would include a weapon or a caustic chemical or something like that, where there's a serious danger of creating serious bodily harm or death. So if you come at me with a knife, now that's aggravated assault. Unless you get me, that's aggravated battery. Okay. And the penalties are much, much stiffer. The assault and battery are all misdemeanors, lower level crimes. So you might go to jail, the county jail. Aggravated assault, aggravated battery are felonies, higher level crimes, and you might go to prison. So it's two different types of penalties there. Okay. So adding a weapon to the mix makes it much more serious. Doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means that the situation has to be right. Okay. And how does the self-defense aspect of that work? When is it okay to use a weapon as a self-defense as opposed to an assault? Okay. So you got to keep in mind that you're now introducing deadly force. And the situation has to warrant that. So if we get in a fist fight and we're pretty evenly matched, I get in a fist fight and then I pull a knife, hey, that's my bad. Because the situation didn't warrant that. Now you get your 6'8" neo-Nazi kickboxing champion that comes after the little old lady. She can probably pull a knife and get away with it because it's really super dangerous for her. True, it's an unarmed combat, but he's going to break her. So she has the right to pull a weapon in that case. Okay, because of the threat of severe bodily harm or death. So if that's there, you can use a weapon. It doesn't matter what weapon it is. It could be a gun, a knife, a car. It doesn't matter.
I think this is again what a lot of people miss is that unfortunately for anybody looking at it, it's typically not the extremes of a neo-Nazi kickboxer and an 87-year-old grandma. It's going to be somebody in the middle, and they got to decide, did this guy really need to pull a knife or not? Now, what about the term brandishing? I've seen that a lot in news stories and police reports. What exactly does that mean?
Brandishing is basically displaying a deadly weapon in a threatening manner or a boisterous manner, or there's one other word that they use, but you get the idea. You're flashing around and being obnoxious with it.
Okay.
Now, if I pull a knife up, hey, look at this, that's not brandishing. But if I pull a knife out and wave it around and says, I'm going to cut all of you, that's brandishing.
All right. Do you have to actually pull it out? Or is it okay? Like kind of just, like they're kind of showing you have a weapon in a threatening manner.
Well, let's look at the code here real quick.
All right.
And we might get that answer here. Hang on.
Sure. No problem.
Exhibition or use of a deadly weapon. Let's see. Anybody who, not in necessary self-defense in the presence of two or more persons, draws or exhibits any deadly weapon. So displaying it would work as well, it sounds like to me.
Okay.
But it has to be in that threatening, boisterous manner.
Right. Now, how about in self-defense? Like we've already mentioned that using a knife is aggravated assault, but in self-defense, in appropriate levels, okay. Is it okay to brandish a weapon in self-defense?
Yeah, assuming it's at that level.
Right.
Once again, if we're evenly matched and it's just a fist fight, man, just brandishing that weapon will probably be a misdemeanor charge for you.
Okay. Now, what is the legal size limit of a knife you can carry?
It varies from place to place. Idaho doesn't care.
Doesn't care, really?
Doesn't care. Concealed, fully exposed, doesn't matter.
Wow.
So long as you're 18 and meet the qualifications to get a concealed license if you needed one, such as you can't be a convicted felon, you can't be convicted of a domestic violence. There's a few other things.
Okay.
Assuming none of those are in play and you're 18 or older, carry what you want.
Very interesting. I know that in California, again, I only know California because that's where I'm from. I know California, I believe it's 3 inches as long as it's a fixed blade. And some people don't realize that a folding knife is considered a fixed blade, even though it's folding. I don't know if you know this, you might be shocked, but in Japan, I think the limit's like 2 centimeters or 3 centimeters. Yeah, exactly.
I'm not surprised. It doesn't take very much to nick that jugular vein, right?
Nah, yeah, that's the limiter. And it's a very different culture as well, as I already mentioned. Okay, moving on then to the next thing is castle law or castle doctrine. Not to be confused with stand your ground, which I understand is more based on guns. What exactly is castle law?
So in Idaho, that castle law, the stand your ground, it's all basically the same thing. But there is a special section in there for dwellings or businesses, a place where you're enclosed. So now let's just get to that here real quick here.
Sure.
Defense of others, let's see. A person using force or deadly force in defense of a habitation, place of business or employment or occupied vehicle is presumed to have acted reasonably and had a reasonable fear of imminent peril of death or serious bodily injury if entry was made or attempted in a violent manner. Like if I just knock on the door and open it, you can't shoot me. But if I kick the door in, my bad, you're going to own me. And remember, this is Idaho. It's different in other places.
Now, I explained a little bit of what this law is to a British friend of mine. I kind of mentioned this to you before, and right away he was shocked. But then a quick look on Wikipedia says, even though this is an American law, there are elements of it present in other countries, including the UK, and he was shocked again. Now, he is not a police officer, not a lawyer, so I don't know how accurate this is. But he went off, looked around, came back and told me it is in the UK to an appropriate level, meaning if you have a gun and someone threatens you with a knife in your home, you cannot use your gun. Even in that case, you're only allowed to use a knife. Now, in America, it seems like, at least the image is, if you break into someone's home, all bets are off. I mean, it kind of brings to mind the old signs, trespassers will be shot on sight.
Yeah.
What exactly are the limits of this?
Well, if the castle doctrine or that part that I just read to you about breaking into a habitation or a place of business or something like that, deadly force can be used because we're making the assumption that you're in fear of your life.
Okay.
And it doesn't. Once deadly force is employed, it doesn't matter what that deadly force is. It can be a gun, it can be a knife. I can run you over with a car, stick a pen in your eye, whatever. The use of deadly force, the force doesn't matter. If it's going to be deadly force, it's going to be deadly force.
So a gun in a car would be considered equivalent in this case.
Gun, knife, car, pen. Yeah.
All right. Now, I want to run one story by you. For those of you listening, I'm going to mention this in the main podcast, so you'll hear the story twice. And Lynn, I would like to get your opinion on this and ask a quick question. Earlier this year, in July or August, here in Japan, and Japan does not have castle law. So earlier in this summer, a woman came home to her apartment and found an intruder. He had come in through the balcony door. Now, I only found one article on this, and it wasn't very detailed, which is very common for this kind of story in Japan also. And that's something else I don't like. But so she finds this intruder, and the story is not clear if she called the cops. The story does say she called her boyfriend. Her boyfriend comes in and squares off with this intruder and draws a knife and attacks the intruder. Now, again, we don't know who called the cops, but afterwards, finally, the cops arrive. The intruder is taken to the hospital and in unstable condition, serious injuries. The boyfriend is arrested for attempted murder. Now, how would this play out differently in a place with castle law? And what are your thoughts on this as a law enforcement officer?
According to the code, you're welcome to defend another if their life's in danger or in danger of serious bodily harm. So when he comes in, if the burglar's sitting on the couch, I think you probably hadn't ought to do that. If he's got your girlfriend by the throat, light him up. It's pretty cut and dried like that. If somebody's in danger of their life. Now, if you're in the house and somebody breaks in, kicks the door in, comes in violently, the assumption is made that you're in fear for your life and you can use deadly force is authorized. Unless there's indications that wasn't the case.
Right.
So the way we would look at that is what was going on in that house. Was he being nice and drunk and got into the wrong house? Was he burglarizing the house and just wanted out? Was he in the house and now he's taken her hostage? None of those would get you deadly force except for the last one. So it all depends on what's going on in there. What would a reasonable person do? I guess is what that comes down to. And that's different in Japan than it is here.
Right.
It's different here in the West than it is back East. So it all depends on where you're at, what you can do.
That's interesting. You mentioned how even on the West and East, how that would change what is reasonable. Again, coming back to the jury, who's on the jury and what kind of neighborhood you're in might even change what happens.
It could be the same city and just a different culture.
Yeah.
It could be, the difference could be, are you more liberal leaning or are you more conservative leaning? Anything could make the difference in that as to what you think is reasonable. So do what you think's right when you got to do it. I mean, nobody wants us to get hurt.
Right.
You and I, the poor innocents here to be hurt, but they don't want us going overboard for no reason either.
Right.
You don't bring a knife to a fist fight.
I think a lot of people miss that. That's what's interesting about the American law is that it's meant to be that flexible that we can look. It's not just listening to a robot voice of, a list of rules. It's deciding, did this guy act appropriately or not, all things considered. And
part of the interesting thing that goes along with that is particularly in law enforcement, those lines are changing all the time. What's reasonable now next year might not be because the court has now interpreted that law differently. For instance, here in Idaho, we could search a car based on an arrest. If I arrest you out of a car, I could search the whole car. Can't do that now. The courts have reinterpreted that to where I can only search the car looking for evidence in relation to the exact charge I arrested you for. So if I arrest you for drugs, I can tear the car apart looking for drugs. But if I arrest you for DUI, I can only go looking for containers of alcohol.
Now, how does that work? If you're looking for alcohol and you find drugs, is it still admissible as evidence?
So long as you're where you ought to be, that's fine. You can use it. Yeah. So the laws change. They move a little bit. Depending on court decisions, and it's a constant battle to stay on top of it. Doesn't change quite so much in the civilian world, but you kind of need to keep track of where you're at, what the rules are, where you're at. And if you want to stay on top of it, keep track of those judicial decisions.
And I imagine that's difficult, again, because as a law enforcement officer, are you supposed to be a warrior or a protector of the peace or just a neighborhood nice guy taking care of everybody? Again, everyone's going to have different interpretation of what are police supposed to do, and the laws are going to change. And I imagine that must be difficult, trying to just figure out what is okay and what is not okay over time.
The answer to that is yes.
Yes.
We're everything to everybody. Yeah, we kind of a jack of all trades. We got to know, man. Got to be a doctor, got to be a counselor, got to be a guardian, got to be, there's a lot of things we have to do and we have to be. And it's a challenge, but that's part of the fun of the job, is rising to that challenge.
Now, I want to go on to our next topic, which is a bonus topic for this bonus podcast and our bonus listeners, audience members. I want to talk very briefly on organized crime. Kajukenbo is self-defense. That means partly knowing how to not get yourself in trouble. And there are an organized criminal organizations out there, as a presence out there. Now, here in Japan, everyone knows in Japan we have the Yakuza. And they are very high profile. You can visit an office headquarters of theirs if you like. They have business cards and websites and fan magazines. They have Halloween parties for the local kids. Everyone knows who they are. And yet Japan is one of the safest places in the country, largely because you don't mess with them, they don't mess with you. And Japanese people love to not mess with someone they don't know. So that's already what's going on there. Now, having said that, I've had the feeling, based on rumors and things I've heard, that we might be at the beginning of the end of the Yakuza. This is my own personal opinion, because they're going to be around for a long time. But I've heard many times that younger people are less likely to join the Yakuza now. They're having a hard time recruiting. They're having a harder time getting guns into the country. A lot of the pachinko parlors are now not run by Yakuza. Now they're run by Chinese, Korean businessmen. So it seems like we're moving in a way where they're having a harder and harder time surviving in the modern day. In America, what is the current state of organized crime and the cartels? How's that looking over there?
Oh, they're doing fine. Yeah, there's no signs of slowing down for them. They're only getting stronger, to tell you the truth. Here where I live, there's two interstates that cross. I live in Pocatello, and you got I-84 headed east and I-15 headed north-south. And so there's a lot of drugs that roll through here. So it's kind of an attractive place. We've got several different outlaw motorcycle gangs here who is all about, they're all about drugs and prostitution and making money. And then we've got serious influx from the cartels, not only traditionally Hispanic gangs, but we have connections to the actual cartel here as well. But like you said, they generally stay pretty quiet unless you get in their way. And then they'll certainly act out. Most of the violence that I've seen here seems, I suspect, because I don't get involved in cases anymore, but I suspect were drug deals gone bad. Somebody didn't pay their debt. Somebody owed somebody something. Somebody tried to steal something, and you pay the price for that. But if you just live your life, you will probably be fine. It's not like these guys are out looking to mug you, and that's here. Somewhere else it might be different. But generally speaking, they just want to make money.
Right.
And you can't make money in jail.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, I hear that in the 80s, that's kind of why Las Vegas was so safe. I mean, the organized crime, the mafia was out in Vegas, and their goal was not violence. Their goal was to make money, and that meant having tight security. So even though they were everywhere, like, you didn't want to mess around. It was actually pretty safe in Vegas because they wanted it to be quiet. They wanted it just to get money, and that's it.
Until you messed with them.
Yeah, exactly.
And then it was just ugly.
Now, speaking of that kind of situation, again, because times have changed, in Japan, if you happen to talk with Yakuza, especially if you're not Asian, they're actually really friendly and actually can be fun to talk with and drink with, because partly Japanese people love foreign culture, but also they can actually be pretty fun. However, many Japanese people will tell you, and I've had some foreign non-Japanese friends who've told me the same thing through experience, depending on the crime, even if it's an automobile hit and run or something more violent, this is a country where if you are in a legal situation with Yakuza, the cops will come because they were called, and they'll look around and they'll say, "Oh, sorry, man. I want to help you, but that guy's a Yakuza, so I cannot help you. You are on your own." They will literally say that we cannot help you because he's a Yakuza member. In the States, does that kind of thing happen, or like it used to with cops being paid off? Or do you have any advice for anybody who accidentally gets wrapped up in a hit and run with a gang member, or is there anything to be careful of specifically?
When you talk about upper level mafiosa type crime, where they're running businesses and they're owning businessmen and politicians, I got no idea. That was way above my pay grade.
Okay.
So I dealt with the street level stuff.
Okay.
And those guys just don't want to go to jail.
Mm-hmm.
They can't make any money. Now, if you, like, for instance, you get involved in a hit and run and my bad guy leaves, his friends probably won't give him up. His family probably won't give him up. You'll have a hard time getting to him because he's protected.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably about as far as it goes, though. Mm-hmm. If I need to step in and take care of something, I can usually do that most of the time. And then everything's fine until it's not. Mm-hmm. And so just out of the blue, all of a sudden somebody just gets froggy and it gets ugly really quick.
Yeah.
It all depends on what they're thinking. As far as police contacts. And that's one of the dangers of police work is I don't know what you're thinking. Mm-hmm. To me, it's a simple warrant service or it's a simple arrest for something stupid. Mm-hmm. But to you, it's going to cost you your job. It's going to cost you your house, your wife, your life. It's really serious. And so you might react differently than what I expect. Mm-hmm. Well, that's one of the dangers we have to deal with all the time.
Not knowing what the guy's thinking. Exactly. Yeah.
Not knowing what the guy's thinking. Had a guy try to kill me because he thought he had a warrant for arson and attempted homicide. So when we got everything settled down and taken care of, we called the agency we said this happened. Now they didn't have any idea. Wow. You see what I'm saying about what are they thinking?
Right.
And that's what makes this job so dangerous. To me, it's a speeding ticket, but to you, could be a whole lot worse than that. You might know something that I don't know. Mm-hmm. So that makes it really dangerous. And so when we're dealing with gangs, back to your original question, that's the danger is I don't know what we actually have going on here. Mm-hmm. Was that a drug deal that went bad? Was it a really big drug deal that went bad? I got sent to a parking violation. Walked up and looked in the car and there was a softball-sized ball of meth sitting on the floorboards in the car. Now that parking situation just got serious.
Right.
So yeah, we never know. Mm-hmm. So they're dangerous, but generally speaking, we all stay out of each other's way. They go do their thing and they do it quietly and on the side, and the general society lives their life and are never bothered by them. But when you cross them, it could be a problem. All right.
So going to finish off the show now. Everyone who knows this show knows that we end with kind of a nerd pop culture question. And Lynn, I'm going to ask you the same question I'm going to ask the other guys. What is the best cop movie or cop TV show? I'm going with the show Dragnet because I watched the old reruns in the 80s and Nick at Night. As a kid, I saw it, and it was, of course, very, what's the word? It's very black and white sitcom-ish. It's very simple and not exactly the most realistic show. But I think especially for that time, it really gave an interesting view to a world that most people did not know. I think the main actor's acting is, Joe Friday talking like a robot all the time, but it was kind of cool. It had a cool image that he created. What about yourself? How would you respond to that question? What are the best?
Well, see all the gray hair? I'm kind of old. Dragnet was actually my second. I went with Adam 12.
Adam 12.
Yeah. Old early 70s, late 60s LAPD. Very straight laced. A lot like Dragnet. That was probably one of my favorites. And I watch cop shows now. I just wind up yelling at the screen.
Why is that?
Because you can't do that. Who trained you? Who taught you how to put handcuffs on? You don't handle a gun like that. Yeah. And unfortunately, it's rubbed off on my wife. She's doing it now too. So I just sit over there and giggle and let her yell at them.
Living vicariously. That's great.
Yeah.
You got to see some of. There's an old Japanese show called Seibu Keisatsu. It's like Seibu is the name of a fictional area, and Keisatsu is police. This show is like from the 70s, and it's everything you say, but then even to an untrained eye, it looks terrible. Cops are running around with guns like this in the air, like not even. I love it because it's terrible, but it's just fun to watch. But I can understand exactly where you're coming from.
Yeah, one of the problems with police shows, cop shows now is they're so unrealistic. There isn't. I can't think of a show out there that puts us in a good light. They don't ever show what it really is. All they show is misbehaving. Every cop's dirty. They have unrealistic expectations, and every cop's dirty. And you listen to the media, and it's a rough place to be right now. I don't think I would work in a big city at all right now. Fortunately, here in Idaho, pretty conservative place. We still love our cops. It's still a good place to work.
Well, that reminds me. Are you familiar with a movie called Training Day?
Oh God.
Yeah. Okay. See, now I saw that with my father. I mentioned he was an Oakland police officer even at that time. Now, as a student, later on I was studying drama and exhibition, all kinds of storytelling. I liked it as a movie, but I remember my dad was angry at that movie, and I was like, "What's going on?" Again, I wasn't a cop. I was a kid. I was asking what's going on. And the way he explained it to me is that nobody's going to look at the main character being a good cop. Everyone's going to focus on Denzel Washington's character, who's the dirty cop. And they're going to say all cops are like that.
Yep. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. It's kind of a recipe for disaster.
Do you think anything can change in the future?
My experience has been in the last 30, 40 years that it's kind of like a pendulum. It'll swing back and forth and back and forth. And, 9/11 was a great big swing towards we love them, they're heroes and take care of them. Now we're swinging way back the other way. Something will happen. We'll swing back the other way. It may or may not get as far, but it seems to be a bit of a pendulum. So I suspect it'll get better. How long it'll take to do that, I have no idea. No idea.
All right, so we are all finished for today. First off, thank you, Lynn, for joining us. It is always a pleasure to talk with you, and maybe we can do something like this again in the future. It's always enjoyable. For those of you at home, please click like, share, comment, and subscribe. If you know anybody who's interested not only in martial arts, but also law enforcement or legal practice, please share this video with them. And if you are a member of law enforcement or you have legal experience, please comment. Let us know not only what you think, but if you have anything to add to this. As we mentioned, laws will change, and Idaho laws will be very different from California or New York. If you have anything to add, anything experience that you would like to share, please feel free to share that. Otherwise, we hope to see you guys again soon. Until then, stay strong, stay Kajukenbo strong. Mahalo.
Aloha.